So yeah, let's start first by knowing a bit about you, right? So I've gone through your LinkedIn, but would still like to know how you took those decisions. What has been your career journey been?
Yeah, man. So, kind of always been into computer engineering, I would say. So, always kind of wanted to do something related to developing something in the software space. Um, wasn't really sure what it was, but that was always the goal from a long time. Even before I got into college, that's kind of where I wanted to go. And then kind of Microsoft happened. So, that was like a really good journey for me to kind of get into one of my dream companies kind of growing up. So yeah, around like I would say like 2.5 years into that journey, I kind of got to a point, like a lot of people get where you kind of feel like, hey, you have learned kind of a lot of what you want to, at least from the same team. So I've been working in the same team for around 2.5 years at that point. So then I was kind of thinking, okay, what next? So I went through the usual questions. Do you want to switch to another team? Do I want to go to another company? That kind of thing. And the entrepreneurship was always there. But I'm
Mm,
one of those people, I never wanted to do a solo startup. I know how hard that journey can be. And I kind of, now that I do it, I can see, why that solo startup, journey is so, like, if I didn't have my co-founder, half of the things, wouldn't happen.
mm,
So I was kind of, I would say, waiting for the right person to come in, for me to be able to, kind of do it. So I wouldn't say I was actively kind of looking at entrepreneurship as a path, but yeah, but kind of was looking around, and somehow COVID happened. And then my co-founder was kind of working on some other idea, and he kind of reached out to me because he was also kind of the thing he was working on was in like a hardware space, and during COVID, a lot of things shut down. So he
yeah.
was kind of do something in the software space, and that's kind of where I gotten, and I knew him way back from high school, so I already knew, okay, I would like to work with him, that kind of a thing. So it just right place, right time, kind of a thing. It was we started off when we started off building Quinn, it was a very different problem statement. We were actually building a social network in the beauty space, and we did that for about a year and a half. A lot of reasons kind of didn't work out, and
Mm.
from there we kind of had a lot of learnings about media, about videos, and how that was impacting purchase journeys. And that's kind of how we did the pivot, and we have Quinn as it is today.
Nice, nice, very interesting. Let me like pick on each one of
Sure,
those
sure, sure.
parts in depth, right? So, before Microsoft, I think you had an interim CTO role. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I actually did an internship when I was final year of college with Deutsche Post. It's in Bonn, Germany. So when I was there, a few of quite a bunch of people that I knew, they were kind of working on this platform to kind of like a friend finder kind of a thing, if that makes sense. So they were kind of, how similar to how Mello and stuff are doing for
Mm,
Bangalore right now. So they wanted to do something in similar in Europe. They were starting out in Sweden, kind of, and they were just starting out. They didn't have a lot of tech background, and
mm,
I had a lot of free time in my hands during the weekends and stuff, and I knew these people, so I was like, okay, let me come in. I'll help you guys with tech. And again, at that point, I wasn't really looking to go at it full term, especially because I kind of had an offer from Microsoft sitting there, and that was always a dream company. So I always wanted to work somewhere first before I you know
mm.
and took this journey, because I was like, otherwise I just don't have, actual experience before I started. So yeah, so at that time I was like, okay, I'll join you guys for some time. And then, my internship was there for like 6 months. So I'll do that with you, and I'm going to come back to India anyways. So at that time I will, kind of hand over it to someone else, and you guys can continue it onwards. So that's kind of how it, but then again, unfortunately it didn't work out. We did a pilot and stuff, but again, yeah, yeah, that was kind of a very interesting experience, though. Kind of gave me a lot of understanding on how to
Mm.
kind of manage a small team and kind of work around that.
Got it. Got it. Another thing which I also wanted to discuss. So, like after my college, I went into Morgan Stanley, and like the reason was that I was very interested in software engineering and was very interested in statistics and machine learning. So I thought like finance and more especially like the options trading, that side of finance is going to be the perfect sort of fit. because that's how the interviews were, that's how the pitch was also. But like as good as the company was, the reality of working in a big tech company, right, is, at least to me, was very different from what I had imagined. I thought it would be like a exciting place where I'll be discovering new things. It will have like massive ramifications all around, right? But it just felt so slow. Um, how was your experience with, like, what were your expectations before going into Microsoft and like experience over there?
So for me, Microsoft is a little bit of an outlier because I wanted to. It's kind of very weird when I say it out loud, but I wanted to kind of join Microsoft ever since I was very little. With kind of a lot of very weird circumstances where a lot of things that I was trying my hands on with software development and stuff, Microsoft used to pop up a lot, and it was kind of like one of those things like, hey, I want to work at Microsoft. It just happened to happen, so yeah, kind of got lucky there. But I guess there's a lot of that motivation also going in, like, hey, this is my dream company, I'm coming in here. So I was already pumped up pretty much.
Hmm.
I went there. But what I would say the biggest contributing factor was that I had amazing managers. I think I would say I have been pretty lucky with having really good managers all through my career. Like through my internships, when I was doing internships, I had like some really solid managers that I learned a lot from. Then during Microsoft as well, I had two solid managers. When I went for my internship in Germany, I had a amazing manager as well. So yeah, so like 4 or 5 really awesome managers that kind of set me up. So that's why I still kind of believe that managers are probably the most important thing. Like the work, comes and goes. But if your manager is there and they are right, then you can always talk to them. They will give you the right things to do. I still remember when I was so my Microsoft thing was kind of an internship that got converted to a PPO kind of a situation. So when we went to Microsoft for the PPO, you kind of get projects assigned pretty randomly, right? Like you
Hmm.
don't, as a fresher, you don't have a lot of control over what you work on. So what I saw is that your managers, the good managers would end up trusting you with a lot more impactful work, and the bad managers would kind of just try to give you stuff to just get
Hmm.
it done. So for example, I had a few friends who also went with the internship with me, and they were really solid developers as well. But it just so happened that their managers weren't as good, and they ended up working on very non-impactful items, and that makes it very hard for them to even get that placement opportunity after, because there's nothing to showcase.
Hmm.
On the other hand, I still remember this one incident where my manager kind of there was a couple of other senior managers in the team who were kind of discussing with my manager as to what to give me for my internship, and it's just a 2 month internship, right? So there's not a lot of time
Yeah.
to like value, and they were kind of pushing to give me some kind of very basic items to like a basic dashboard, something like that. And my manager was the one who strongly said, no, I want him, he's coming as an intern, I want him to have some good work. If it doesn't get done, that's fine, but let him do it, that kind of a thing. So when you have that manager who kind of bats for you, it makes it way more fun and kind of so yeah, I think my whole full-time employment kind of journey has been good. Then another manager came in, kind of very similar experience as well. So I don't think I have anything like I did not have that moment that I heard from a lot of people, working with tech, and you suddenly feel like this is not what I was expecting. It was fun.
Hmm.
The thing that made me want to switch is simply that, I had kind of reached that saturation point where I was getting very complacent. It was like every day I was coming to work and I was like, yeah, this is very easy, because I know
Hmm.
all the systems at that point. And there were times where the whole week I would have to work just a few hours and I would still get it done because it was like everything I had worked on for like, the last 2 years. So that, and so like 3 4 months I just just cruise along, and that kind of made me think that okay, I need to get out of this complacency. And yeah, that's kind of what happened.
I think that's important because if you're like in that place for long, then you actually become complacent, right? Like then it becomes
and
harder and
it's
harder to.
and it's so hard to get out as well when you're complacent, because you're like making good money, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're a good company, you're making good money and you have to do very less, and you have so much free time to do your own things. It's just so hard for you to just go and say, okay, screw this, I'm gonna take a risk and go into this other company, and like maybe, and things might be really bad there. So you
Hmm.
so I know quite a lot of people as well who have kind of ended up being stuck in this loop for years, and now they
Yeah.
kind of look back and regret that, hey, my career progression has just stuck. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like a lot of my friends who have been in the same company for like now 6, 7 years since I've graduated. Now it's very hard for them to like leave
Yeah.
because even apart from work, your personal life also gets settled
Oh,
accordingly, right? Your
that
like
is actually
place,
true.
the friends, and
Hmm.
everything
That is
becomes hard
actually true.
to
Yeah, 5, 6 years. Yeah, you the most of your friend circle is now in the company. So now it's like even harder. Yeah,
exactly.
that's yeah. I like if I ever whenever I meet my juniors and stuff, and if anyone ever tells me like, hey, job is easy, I always tell them, hey man, think once. Do you want to might be the right time to kind of think about taking something more challenging. I mean, it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be a company switch. It can be as simple as a team switch. But something needs to change if it's getting too easy. Uh,
mm. And what about like, so when you were jumping to starting a company, right? Did it ever occur to you that, hey, I've only been in the software engineering space for like 2, 3 years, right? So I probably don't know a lot of things. And you probably also don't know what you don't know, right? So did
sure.
it occur to you that maybe I should spend more time working at different places and then thinking of starting the company,
So
or was it clear to you?
So for me, it's like might be a little bit of a different kind of a scenario. So I kind of started like let's say programming by myself, like very young age, kind of very interested into this space. So by the time I got to college, I was already kind of really hands on with like whatever I can find. I would try to kind of learn myself and that kind of stuff. So the first year of college, I would get in and I immediately started to look for internship. So almost, I would say the entirety of the 4 years that I was in college, I tried to find some startups that were, near me. I back then, we didn't have these online internships and stuff. It had to be in person, right? So my area was kind of restricted, but yeah, I studied in Manipal. That was a pretty good startup ecosystem, I would say. So I was able to find some really good startups coming there. So I was able to work under some really, really smart folks. So I would say by the time I even got to Microsoft, I had already worked around like 3 years-ish, I would say, with startups building good products. So I had like some idea, and then I went into Microsoft. So I got the corporate side of it. So in my mind, I was thinking more or less that I actually had more like a 4 or 5 year experience from a pure work perspective. So I kind of felt ready to kind of at least try it out. And then the second thing is there, right? Like, I think the biggest factor for me to do a startup was to find the right co-founder. And that is not something that comes around very frequently. So I told myself, like, if I'm even a little bit sure about this, I have to do the jump. Otherwise, maybe it won't come again, that kind of a thing. So yeah, just went at it. I mean, obviously, I made a lot of mistakes with the first product that we built and stuff, but that's fine. That's how life goes.
Love the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And like I've met so many people. I've also been in the same boat at some point of time of finding a co-founder, right? And like in my scenario, I just left my job and I started working on this and then found the co-founder and then we started working on something together. But I think a lot of people are waiting for the right co-founder to happen, right? And sometimes it's just pure serendipity and it just you just find the right person. But sometimes you also have to go out and find
Oh, for
them
sure.
yourself, right?
For sure.
So did you spend some time in figuring out
Sorry,
and
I can't hear you. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, right? Like, yeah, it's a lot of luck, but you can't be lucky if you're not actively trying to look out for it, that kind of a thing. So I was kind of looking out, I would say at that time. I was actually asking around. So one thing I knew for a fact is I didn't want to have, like a random co-founder. I know a lot of people kind of do that. I think it's very hard to make that work.
mm,
It works sometimes, but it's so like, just to know that other person will sync in well with you, it's so hard. So with this, surprisingly, at the same time, when I was kind of looking at potential co-founders, also I was kind of applying to Amazon and a bunch of other things as well at the same time, because I was very unsure as to what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to change something. And as a matter of fact, my co-founder reached out to me and he told me, hey, I've been working on this problem statement. It kind of didn't work out because of COVID. I'm kind of trying to pivot into the social space, kind of building something new. Do I want to join? And he had actually asked a couple of other friends of us before, and someone else kind of mentioned my name because we were in the same high school growing up. So that's kind of how he reached out to me, and we had quite a bit of history kind of working in the past. Like we had, when we were in school, we had attendance of competitions together, that kind of stuff. So I knew how it was to kind of work with him. So in my mind, it was like, the idea is secondary. And that actually proved out to be great because we also had a pivot. So now what we're doing has nothing to do with the idea, we started out with. So I wasn't too worried about the idea, but the co-founder was there. So I was like, let's go in. So, but yeah, of course, you're kind of, it's your first job and it's Microsoft and you're trying to quit that. So it's going to be a little tricky. So the first thing that we did is me co-founder and my co-founder, we kind of had this agreement, I would say, where for 1 month, we wanted to kind of work during the weekends, kind of build out very basic MVPs and kind of just see how it was to work with each other. Because the last time we ever worked, I mean, and that was in a school setting and that was so many years ago. And we wanted to know that, hey, things were gelling in well. And at this time, we actually had a third co-founder as well. And he was also kind of trying to figure out if this would be a good arrangement. So it was three of us, we were working. And what we did was we put a hard deadline. So the hard deadline was like 2 months later. And we said by this deadline, we will either say yes or no. And if we say yes, we would quit the job and we'll go full in on it. And so I worked during the weekends and I really enjoyed it. Like it was actually fun, and especially at a time where my job was feeling very, that complacency was kicking in. So this was like really exciting. It was fun working with my co-founder. So we I said yes by that deadline. The other co-founder that we had, he said no. So it ended up being a 2% team. And then, I put in my papers and we just went on with Quinn.
And tell me about like your first idea. How did you decide on that?
So the first idea was almost entirely, I would say, the crux of it was from my co-founder's perspective. So initially, what we were building was
It
we were
did
building.
work out, so you want to put it on him?
Not really. So I'll
Just
tell you.
just joking.
No, no. So that's kind of how it, and it was very surprising for me. Like people ask me, like when I say that I was working on this, as to like, why did you pick this problem statement? So kind of give you an idea. So my co-founder was, before this, he was working on, building some physical devices for hair care, where you could put like a strand of your hair. It would give you like some analysis on what the properties were and kind of recommend you treatments. So the plan was to kind of sell it to salons and that kind of stuff. But COVID hit, salons shut down, so it couldn't work anymore. So he had this thought, okay, the problem statement is to help people with textured hair. And for textured hair people, it's very hard to maintain. Like I wouldn't know that because I don't have textured hair, but my co-founder does. So that's where the problem statement came from. So the idea was to, where can you go and help these people out? So what he kind of did initially as a very crude prototype is he would go and reach out to other people worldwide, kind of, and ask them, hey, would you mind sharing your routine with me? And he would have like a PDF of this routine, and he would like email it to someone else who had the same hair type, with their permission, of course. And he would basically connect these people with the same kind of hair. So it's kind of like one of your, you have these fitness apps where you can kind of connect with people with the same fitness goal, and you kind of keep each other accountable, that kind of a system. So his thought was, what happens if you take it digital? The concept, like instead of a device analyzing your hair, how about you have a friend who has the same, conditions and systems as you, and you learn from them. And so that's kind of where I came in, and that's so while hair care wasn't a particular pain point for me, social networks was something that really excited me back then. So I was very interested in solving the social aspect of this. So that's where I came in. So I kind of wanted to like build that experience of connecting people. So we kind of ended up building. It was almost like a, I would say, curated Facebook for uh, hair care, and we kind of wanted to expand in the beauty space. And so that's kind of what happened. Eventually it didn't work out, primarily because we kind of saw that so at its peak we had like around 50,000 users ish, mostly UK, US women.
Um,
Am I audible?
yes. I can hear you.
Yeah, I think your video is stuck. That's why I wanted to just check in. Oh yeah, it's red again.
I'm not sure what's happening. Give me a second.
What does my signal showcase as?
Yours also shows red to me. I don't know what's
Oh
like the,
God, what is? Yeah, I have no idea what's happening.
but now I think it's fine. So like when the
Yeah,
first time you had mentioned this, I switched to a different Wi-Fi, which is like the
yeah. Now
first
it's
thing
coming
on.
fine as well. It's just I think it just gets stuck in between. I don't know. I could totally be my internet, but again, I don't
Okay.
use Zoom much, so I don't know how this indicators and stuff works.
Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
you were saying.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, yeah, we kind of figured out social networks is a very hard problem. You kind of there's no instant gratification. There's no one to get money from. Social users aren't particularly fond of paying you money upfront.
Yeah,
And something like, an advertising game needs so many users to come in.
yeah.
But then what we realized is that ours was kind of like a self-help app kind of a thing. So what we realized is people would eventually kind of figure their stuff out. And once they figured it out, they would just move out of their platform and go to something like Instagram. And a lot of them
Hmm.
would go to Instagram, become an influencer, make money there and that kind of stuff. So we had this very big leaky bucket kind of a problem. We would get people in, people would like the
Hmm.
app, but eventually they would just move. And so at that point we had this question we asked ourselves, and this was like about a year into the journey where we kind of hit that cap where we're like it was getting very hard to get people in organically. And again,
Hmm.
we were very careful about spending. We didn't do any kind of paid marketing. It was most of it was almost entirely organic.
Hmm.
So like our thought process was if you can't do it organically, it's not gonna work if you just start paying for stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of at that point we asked ourselves, do we want to stay in this space or do we want to do something new? Just take the loss. So yeah, we kind of took a short break for like a couple of months. I mean, the company was still running as the same entity, same set of people, but we kind of took a step back, kind of reevaluated all the learnings we had, and out of that is where the video commerce thing came out of. So we had done some I would say like a POC kind of a thing on our app itself where we introduced this reels kind of a section. It was slightly
Hmm.
different in the terms that you would tag products that you were using, and in the reels you were kind of trying to showcase, hey, I use this shampoo or this conditioner and this is how my hair looks before and after, that kind of a thing. And what we realized was a lot of people were interested in this. They would go check out the products way more enthusiastically once they saw the video. And we
Hmm.
asked ourselves, how would it look like if we put videos like these on brand websites? So that's kind of where the initial thought process of this idea came along. And we did some pilots with some Indian brands and yeah, just took it from there.
Nice. Nice. And how, like during this pivot, how did your team react to it? Like,
Oh,
was the morale
Oh,
down
it,
for
it
a?
it was. So, I mean, the biggest morale hit was definitely, me and my co-founder because, this was almost a year and a half in, I would say, into the
Hmm.
journey. And it was, and at that time we had absolutely no idea what we wanted to do. And we were actually brainstorming with a bunch of ideas. We were even thinking of things like a very hard pivot kind of a thing as well. Like this kind of, it's still a hard pivot, but at least it was like a, continuation from a learning perspective. But the other ideas, we were looking at so many other spaces, and it was at one point it was getting very overwhelming in the sense like we kind of felt like we had lost direction.
Hmm.
Our team was very small, so it wasn't a very big team problem. Like from an engineering perspective, it was just me, one team member, and one team member who's still there, by the way, and then one intern and one more team member was there. So the intern was short term anyways, so they had left. There was only one team member who left at the end of the pivot
Hmm.
because again they were not very sure. One of our team members stuck with us; they're still with us right now. So yeah, that's kind of how it was. So the hardest was, I would say, for us because our team was still kind of building features for the app itself. We
Hmm.
tried to not let it trickle down too much. I mean, they knew that we were looking at pivot as a thing. It was not something like we didn't want to tell them that hey, the pivot was going to happen. But they were like completely focused on just this, so that in case we thought that hey, we wanted to come back to this, it's not we just didn't like pull the plug immediately kind of a situation.
And like one thing, I was also like a software engineer, data scientist, and then moved to a CTO, right? one thing which was new to me was managing people, and I always have been like a sort of nice guy. So, but that doesn't really work well in management, right? So, how was your like jump into management? Did you make any mistakes? What are your learnings?
I mean, for sure. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes, for sure. I think, again, a lot of the positives came from the same fact that I have, even though I've only worked full time per se 2.5 years because of my internships and all these other stuff, I have had the chance to kind of work with, I would say, 5 managers, and all of them have been great. And all of them, with all of them, I could like cherry pick like some really good quality that they had. Like one person would be like a really good, they had this ability to rally team members. This other person that I knew, they were really good at kind of explaining tech, in ways that people understood. So, like all of these things that I would like kind of absorb, working with these people, I try to kind of emulate that. Of course, I would make mistakes, and I would used to have these very frequent feedback sessions with my teammates, where I would get those, I would kind of correct myself. So yeah, it was a long process. I would say the first year and a half of me being a manager, I wouldn't say it was really great or anything. I kind of thought of myself as a engineer first, manager second. Now
Mm.
it's kind of slowly changing because now I have a proper engineering team. So I kind of trust them to do most of that work. So I can almost entirely focus on product and uh, you know people management, that kind of setup, and just come in from an engineering perspective when it's required, or look at very high level engineering items.
And what are your biggest learnings from managing people? So I'll just share mine for a reference. Like mine was giving feedback properly, like quickly, and if needed, be harsh, but with a respectful tone. And I earlier I would just sugarcoat things so that people don't feel bad, but then it just becomes worse later on.
Oh, true.
So what's your biggest learning from managing people?
Yeah, so feedback is definitely one of them. So one of the things that I've learned over time, when it comes to feedback, is the idea is to never say that someone did something wrong. That almost never works from my experience. Like, for example, if I go and say, if like I kind of think of, so I have this thing where anytime something happens, your instant reaction, no matter how good a manager you are, your instant reaction is like, shit, this went bad,
Mm,
and you have this instant want to kind of reach out to this person and be like, why is this wrong or something like that, right? So I have this rule right now, like anytime that happens, I won't touch my Slack. It's like it's there. I'm not gonna react to it. I take a couple of hours, like I do something else. Like it's fine, it happened. So I just maybe send out a message that's something like, hey, let's fix this. And I completely forget about it for some time. Then I come back, and at that time, it's the firefighting has been done. And I kind of ask myself at that point, like, hey, if someone else was telling me this, how would this feel? That particular statement feel? And I kind of iterate on it, I would say. And I always try to face it in a way, because my thought process is, there's two kinds of people that you have in your team. One is they are just not the right fit for the job. I mean, that happens. But if that is the case, then no amount of feedback is going to fundamentally solve the problem. You have to kind of look at
mm,
it from a kind of a longer lens. But I'm going to assume, like, for example, in my team, all of them have been for longer than a year. So at that point, I can kind of trust them, in the sense that they're all pretty solid engineers. So I know for a fact that, objectively speaking, it it was an error that happens with everyone. I've made a lot of mistakes in my engineering time as well. So it's
mm,
kind of more of kind of figuring out a previous instance of something they have done right. And usually I would find like some patterns of things where they have done right, and there has been some lapse that happened. And usually maybe sometimes the lapses are because people were trying to, let's say, push a feature very quickly. And a lot
mm,
of time this happens because I genuinely feel it's not like even like a one person problem, it's like a team problem. Like we don't have the right process in place. So the better way to kind of give that feedback or criticism, I feel, is kind of point out the times when someone has done something really well, and kind of use that as a piggybacking point to kind of say, hey, this is kind of this was when you were at your best, and this would be great if this happened again. That kind of a thing. So it becomes more of a motivator in the sense that everyone wants to be better at doing it. So I found that to work better than kind of just saying, hey, this was wrong, fix this, that kind of stuff. So yeah, from a feedback perspective, that's always been kind of one thing that I've had. But the other, I would say the biggest learning I've had is to kind of and it's kind of not a very popular topic to talk about, kind of the firing side of things. We have unfortunately had to have, kind of do a couple of firings in our time. But one thing that kind of tells that kind of I remind myself is, if you hire someone, you have to kind of take the responsibility that, hey, you made a bad hire, so you kind of have to, it's your responsibility to kind of handle it gracefully. But at the same time, a lot of co-founders I've seen, if especially people who are not a very big people person, they find it really hard to let go. So it happened to me as well, especially with the first time we have had to let go someone from the team. And what I would, the way I would, it would make sense to me is that if your team, especially as an early stage startup, you would have what, 10, 20 people at max, right? And the way I tell myself is, if one person in your 5% engineering team is bad, that's 20% of your team. So if your 20% of your team is not up to the mark, you are basically making it worse for the other 4 people in the team, right? So as soon as you start thinking in that direction, it changes from a, you making something worse for someone else to kind of a problem statement where you are trying to make it better for the other 4. Like, the mistake is still yours and you have to own up to it, and you have to do it the right way. Like, if something doesn't work out, you might have to go out of the way to kind of give them some referrals, kind of figure out where they would fit in well. But you have to make that decision. Like, it's the longer you delay, the more you are taking out of the rest 4. And this is another thing that I found in a lot of cases. People won't come and tell you things upfront. No matter how friendly relationship you have, at the end of the day, everyone kind of looks at you as a manager. So what I found is, you have to schedule those. Like, you have to go and ask them. And a lot of times it has happened to me where, I go and have that one-on-ones, and I hear like 10 different problems that no one ever told me. And, I'm surprised as to, hey, like, I feel like I'm very approachable. But still, what I find is, like, unless you go and like try to engage, people don't want to open up. Like, and it's not even like, it doesn't even have to be about you specifically, in the sense, like, you are not approachable or anything like that. But it's more like people don't want to
It's
crib
more about
about.
the nature
Yeah.
of
They
things.
don't want to. They
Yes.
don't want to be the one who wants to, come and say something
Yeah.
is wrong. So, but if you ask it, it kind of makes it easier for them to do that. So, which is why I like doing some one-on-ones at least once a quarter, kind of a thing. So that helps a lot.
Like, this also reminded me of the first time I had to let go of someone, and it's tough, right?
Yeah.
And like, the one thing which I was also worried about, apart from the person being let go, is like, how will the rest of the team will take it, right?
Yeah.
But to my surprise, like, it wasn't so bad, and that's because they also saw those problems happening.
True.
And but they never reached out to me because of the same reason, right? Like, as a person, you don't want to be like responsible for somebody else being
Yeah, that
let
that
go.
definitely comes in. Yeah, because of which no one is going to, mostly, unless it gets extremely bad, no one's gonna come and tell you like, hey, you have to let this person go.
Hmm.
And no one wants to be that person. Like, if that happens, then it's too bad already. So yeah, so it's the same in my team. Like, in my team, for example, usually it never comes from me per se. It's kind of like more like a team decision. So let's say if you're having a discussion and we find out, sometimes things go wrong, and we have a RCA, and we kind of figure out, okay, maybe this hiring isn't working out. And that's when we kind of get together, like the rest of the team, and have that honest discussion on what people think. And even then, sometimes it's hard to get, the actual facts from a lot of people. There's always people who just don't want to say anything wrong, kind of setup.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of how you build trust, which is also, I think, why having folks who have been in your team for a long time really helps, because
Hmm.
over time you really start understanding their behaviors as well. Like, by now, like, if you ask me about my team, I kind of understand how different members in my team kind of express their opinions. So some people are very vocal, so for those people, I know that I don't need to wait for that one-on-one for them to tell me. So I
Hmm.
might kind of take some extra time from there, and give it to someone else who I know isn't very vocal about things. So I would maybe spend more time, asking them a little more frequently, hey, do you want to have a casual chat about, how things are going? That kind of stuff.
Got it. Another, like interesting question that a lot of to be CTOs or to be founders ask me is about salaries, right? So what is the correct salary? And that there's never a good answer for that. So just to tell you mine, like when I started for the first time, I wanted like us to be very frugal with the money that we had raised. But we had raised decent amount of money, but we took like 50, 60,000 per month as a salary. Like that was what was needed to cover expenses in Bangalore. The second time I started, I took, I'm taking like a higher salary compared to the last time, um, which is like, which is more than what I need, like at the bare minimum, right? And my logic is that because of this reduced stress, I have more freedom to think about, right? What's your like, and another thing that I sort of had thought when I left my job is that I need at least 2 years worth of saving so that when even if I don't raise money, I don't go back to my job just because I don't have any money to start or something or just sustain myself. Right? What's your thought process? Did you have any savings? Did you figure out like what's the correct salary for you?
So, I mean, for me, it was slightly easier because I was working at Microsoft and Microsoft gives pretty decent stock options and things like that. I had quite a bit saved up. So, I wasn't in a situation. And also, on top of that, when we started, it was COVID, right? So,
Hmm.
me, my co founder, we were both staying with our parents. So, we didn't have expenses per se, if that makes sense. And that lasted for 2 years, right? So, almost through our entire initial journey, the expenses wasn't that high. It's only when we come to Bangalore that it's kind of started to balloon up, right? So for us, it was a combination of two things. So we've raised like 2 rounds. So the first round was kind of very very small. That was for the first product, and then when we kind of pivoted to Quinn, we kind of added one more round on top of it. And the way we have kind of raised there has been so the initial, again, we also, when we started, we kind of took something very small, and the whole concept there was two things. One is kind of respect the investor money. That's obviously there. And the second is also, I personally, like, at least what we felt was we wanted to at least start bringing in money before we started drawing, higher salaries, because then at least it's also kind of a self-motivating factor as well. Like, you have this thing like, hey, if we get here, then we'll feel comfortable to draw a little more, and that kind of pushes you to that revenue growth, especially now that we are in a company that's actively selling. So we
Hmm.
have some goals and some targets in our head, like, hey, this is where we want to get, and at this point we can kind of maybe renegotiate some salaries and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so again, I'm not a very big spender, so it's not neither is my co-founder, to be honest. uh, so but I do agree with that part. Like, you do want to probably draw, especially if you're funded, you want to draw at least enough to not worry about expenses, because otherwise it's just, yeah, you don't have the time to do both of it. But you
Yeah,
also probably don't want to get way over and above.
comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, in the sense that you probably don't want to be in a position where it almost feels like a salary.
Hmm.
It also makes you a bit comfortable, I feel. A little bit of, but on the other hand, like, if you are pouring in revenue and that's coming in, then feel free to kind of raise
Hmm.
it a bit, depending on what's coming in. And obviously, I'm guessing, always your investors will always have some caps on it and all that stuff. So yeah, just
Yeah.
respect that, kind of go along with that. And in a lot of cases, to be honest, like, if you are actually doing very good revenue numbers, your investors will be more than happy to kind of raise that limits and do all that stuff, because hey, you're making money, so it works for everyone.
I think what has happened in the last few years, especially during COVID, a lot of fundraising and all, right? So a lot of people drew like crazy salaries, and I think that has raised the expectation for to be founders at how much salary they can draw, right? So like even for example, right now I probably draw like 30 to 40% of what like the market salary would be, and I think that's a good number. It shouldn't be like 80% of what you would be earning otherwise. Because then
Yeah,
it feels
sure. I mean,
like a
for sure. I mean, it's the same in my case as well. Like we draw way less than a lot of other founders that I know in the space are doing. Definitely, I'm drawing way less than what I would be if I was like 5 years into working at something like Microsoft, like way less. But then again, it's about that fact, right? Like you are kind of thinking in your head that that equity is what's creating the value.
value
At
for
the
you.
end of the day, if you are trying to think of it as a at the very least a multi-million-dollar company, then what is the extra, let's say even like what's the extra 20 lakhs a year going to do, at the end of 5 years? It's not gonna matter much. So
Yeah.
if that is kind of helping your company have a longer runway and kind of, because like there's the other factor as well, right? Yes, if you draw a higher salary, maybe you feel a little less stressed, but
Mm.
unless you have raised a lot of money, you'll be stressed about your company finances. So now, which one do you want to be more stressed about? That part also remains.
I was
Uh,
having this conversation with one person who was starting, and he was in one of the big tech companies, so drawing a nice salary. So he was trying to do like that calculation of how much salary he wanted to have. So I just asked him like, what are your expenses and all this. So he calculated that and then added like 70% more for savings. But then I said like, that's what your equity is for, right? Like it's
yeah. I
only
mean,
for the
if
future
you're
bit.
doing a startup, you're not doing the startup to make money. At least not upfront. That's
In the
not the
short term.
yeah. If that's what you wanted to do, you would get way more if you just worked at a job. Like it's. I mean, I remember when we after we did the pivot, there was a quite a big period before we raised the second round of funding, and we had a couple of people still in the team, and they were really good. They're solid engineers, solid set of folks, and no matter what happened, we wanted to ensure that these people get paid on time always. So for around, I would say like something like 3 months or so, me and my co-founder drew zero salaries. And at that time we were not even drawing much. We were drawing like I would say something like 40K or something. So that also because our goal was, okay, these are really solid folks. There's no way we are not gonna pay them.
Mm.
If you don't take money for some time, that's fine. And then when we raised, we kind of started drawing salaries again. So my point is like, yeah, I would honestly, in my perspective, I would always kind of prioritize the team first. Even right now, when we analyze the runway, we always look at how much of the runway is coming from, the monthly expenses coming from me and my co-founder, and we always in our head that's always there, like a very simple option to kind of cut burn. We'll just not draw
Mm.
salaries for some time till the revenue numbers match, for example. So as long as you kind of feel comfortable not drawing that money, that's great. So which is also why I strongly, whenever I talk to someone who's starting up for the first time, I always say like, if possible, get some savings, have the right investments in place. It's
Mm.
yeah, your startup is not going to be a stable income. At least you can't think about it as a stable income, even though nowadays it has been like almost any startup founder, once you raise, they are drawing a stable salary. It's almost but yeah, still you don't want to get into that mindset.
Yeah. I think that's also because like sometimes people assume because of the last few years that fundraising is easy. It's not, right, and it's not going to be like for the next few years as it was for the last couple. And then like when they actually start and they realize that for fundraising you also need a business, like you also need to have something to show for, then it's a bit of a surprise that it will take time, but I'll not draw salary for a long time. So, for example, the first time I started, it took me around a year to raise like some money and then start paying myself.
Hmm.
Um, and that is a pretty like common scenario in my opinion that people should be aware of. But again, because of the last few years, that sort of image has changed quite a bit. So, a
Yeah,
few
that
more
is.
questions for you. Like for someone who's thinking about starting up as a CTO, right? What would you say should be a deciding factor for them if they're confused? That should they start a company? Should they work at a startup? Should they work at some other place?
So I think what helped me. So one thing I would definitely say is, if you haven't yet, I would recommend at least working at one startup and one bigger company before you go, because it kind of helps you. Like I think like startups kind of obviously teach you kind of how to navigate the chaos kind of. And I feel like corporates kind of help you understand structures, and also in corporates you kind of meet a lot of very tenured managers and lot to learn from. So if you at least did one, at each of these, you kind of have a good enough backing to at least get started. So that's one thing. It can be internships, it can be full-time something, but I would definitely think at least get a flavor of both of these. So that's one. Yeah, that's kind of, I think I would be the main one. And the next one I would say is kind of maybe think once as to how you see your career trajectory panning out over the next 20 years. So once you start thinking about it, like, okay, now I'm a SD, then at this year I'm targeting SD2, then I'm getting to senior SD, then I'm doing this, and maybe at this year I'll go to Amazon or Google, and then so once you start actually plotting that across a 20 years horizon, a lot of cases you might like immediately it registers in your head like, why am I doing this? That's kind of happened with me. For example, like I've always been kind of into entrepreneurship, but when I wanted to do that switch, I was asking like, hey, I'm letting go of this opportunity, what's going to happen to my career progression was my question. So I started doing this computation, and I kind of found that like this path, it wasn't very exciting for me per se. Like yeah, I will make money, but that didn't felt that exciting, even if I made less money. And there's always, I think, this thing like, even if let's say your startup doesn't work out, it's like, it's you can always go back, like a lot of people don't think that, but you can. There's a very huge market for people who are looking for ex-founders who have idea. Like for example, I am still in touch with a lot of folks who work at Microsoft and who have been there since the beginning. And because they have been kind of siloed into that engineering space, and now because I'm in a startup, I look after ops, your sales, you're like, I do not that much, but at least I am a part of all these functions. When I again go back and have these talks to them, I kind of start realizing how siloed that software engineering role is. Like uh, and once you get out of, even if your startup doesn't work, that skill set is very valuable to kind of go back into, even if you want to be a software engineer again, or maybe move into something like product or something like that. So I don't think it as a net loss. The max you are losing is the X years of salary, let's say, which in the large scheme of things, it's not a lot,
Doesn't matter.
yeah. So that's one. And also the second thing is, a lot of people actually kind of have that, right? Though I'll do the startup, a few years later, which is fine if you have a plan. Like for example, if you have planned something like, okay, like right now I've only worked at a big organization, I want to work at a startup for the next 2 years, then do a startup. That's a very perfectly sound argument. But then if your argument is something like, I have time to do it, then you're never going to do it. Like it's very simple as that. So at least you need to have a plan. And I also have this thought process, like, the older you get, the less risk appetite you have, right? So it's like, I'm pretty sure, like, if I had been in Microsoft, like now I'm, so like, let's say by the time I'm 30 or something like that, I don't think I would have the confidence to, kind of leave that and go into a startup. That would be very risky for me, in my head at least.
I just turned 30
Yeah.
like this month, and that
It
felt
is.
bad.
No, but it is scarier, right? Like I think, I mean, when did you start? Like a couple of years ago, right? Or last year?
No, so I started my first company in what 2019. So that was
Okay,
three
yeah.
years after my college.
So yeah, so I think then you might be kind of understanding
Yeah.
that problem statement, right? Like I also, me as well, like as I grow older, I do see that risk appetite kind of reducing. Like I kind of want things to be more stable, even in my startup itself. Like, that it's at 24, 25, you are kind of like, okay, it's fine, it doesn't work, I'll get
Yeah.
it done. That kind of a mindset is slowly going away. And you can
Like
only imagine, yeah. Sorry.
there are like multiple reasons. Like, so my last company was acquired by an academy. Then I was for some time just figuring out what to do next, and then I started this company. So, like the second time I was starting, I realized few things which are different from the first time. First, like as you grow in your career, your expectation from career increases in terms of monetary value, in terms of
Yeah.
the reputation that you have, right? So if you're a director of engineering at some nice place, starting from scratch would be harder for you, irrespective of money. You have lesser energy, like because you have maybe more things in your life. personally and all those things. So you can't just just say, hey, I'll just grind 7 days a week. You have to be a bit more realistic about it. I think there are multiple such factors because of which it's harder to start again. Like especially the reputation point. I think people don't think about it that much, but now I have some friends who have been thinking about starting up, but it's that sort of fear of what if they fail is so much
Correct.
higher now.
And also, I mean, you have been into startups like quite a few years right now. So it's also that thing, right? Like no matter how much you try to avoid, there is no way that you can completely, not look at your peers and your friends, how they are progressing in life. And you always have this thought process
Exactly.
that, especially at times when your startup is not doing well, then you have this, almost an
Yeah.
existential crisis in a way where you're thinking, did I make the right choice? Am I going in the right path? And I think it's kind of cyclical as well, right? Like if your startup is doing good, you feel great, you feel like on the top of the world, it's
Yeah.
amazing. But then it
I
goes
don't
down and
know.
you start, yeah. So I mean, it's by now I'm like kind of used to it, so it's kind of accepted nowadays. Even if it goes down, I stay in high spirits. But initially, when it was in the beginning of my startup journey, it hit me a lot, especially when things were not going good. I would like feel very low.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think everyone goes through it. I think that's kind of, I feel like the difference between like the most successful people I've talked to, it's just resilience. I feel like mostly like how long can you put up with this before giving up?
Like for me, one thing which has been very surprising, or not surprising, but um, inspirational is like when I talk to some people in the startup community and they are like so optimistic about things. Like when like so like a normal mind thinks like this is the good path and if this doesn't happen. But then a lot of people who are very successful don't think about the second one that much at all, right? And I think like when you meet with those people or stay with them for a long time, you also start feeling that way. I think that also is really important in
For
this
sure.
journey. But about the peer pressure, like most of my college batchmates are in like Fang in the Bay Area. So whenever like
Yeah.
my company wasn't doing so good, like that was a
Yeah,
big
you would, especially you would
pressure.
look at like how much money they are making and kind
Yeah,
of,
man.
and a lot of other things as well. For example, I haven't taken a vacation in the last 3.5 years. I can't, like, so it's always there, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, okay, there's this, you could have been doing this. But then, yeah, it all depends on, how much you like the startup life. You have to, I feel like you have to enjoy it. Like, it's
Yeah.
almost like the gym, like, you can't just do it for the results. You have to enjoy the process. Otherwise, you'll just burn out after some time.
The thing you were saying about being siloed, right? Like most of the times when I'm now talking to some of my friends who have been in, especially engineering, software engineering, that's like every department is siloed, but software engineering is siloed than most others. Uh,
It's and it's not just siloed. It's almost like and I say this as a software engineer myself. I used to be like this when I started out. As it's almost a reluctance to want to do anything else. Like it's there in most software engineers,
yeah.
and it's
So
very very hard to get out of that.
I used to like look down on the other departments, like, yeah, this is marketing,
I have
like
seen that.
marketing, yeah. But now when I try to do marketing, I know how tough it is and how
Yeah.
important it is.
That is actually something I felt like. I look at the sales team, and it's one of those things where I am like, this engineering problem is so easy, but how are you selling this? Like it's
Yeah,
wide. Like yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I genuinely feel like it's if you're a software engineer, if you have the chance to go work at a startup, and if you work at a startup, ask your team to give you like a little bit of additional responsibility somewhere, and then
mm,
you kind of get that full picture. But then again,
yeah,
finding people who are open to doing this is very hard. And that's kind of what I look at when I'm doing hiring more recently. The newer hires that we have done, that's one of my major criteria. I kind of try to gauge if the software engineers that I'm hiring, are they kind of interested in other aspects. And what
mm,
I've seen, that people who are, they're way more enthusiastic about the product as a whole. Otherwise, what happens is they get very siloed about their own features. They're not thinking about the company as a whole. And
yeah.
Yeah, and these kind of people, they will like come in, they will talk to you, they'll ask you how's the product doing, how's the revenue, and that's great. Like when you hear a person in the company ask you that, you feel happy that hey, they care about the product as much.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Like in my experience, the people who had joined us and were solely focused on the software engineering part of it, they don't find it that interesting because at a startup, like engineering challenges are not at that scale, right? If you're a backend developer, you're not going to get millions of requests and you're not going to do the scaling, but you will be doing lots of other interesting things. So if you're just interested in that part, you'll not find it like a good place. Nice, man. Like, so good talking to you, Arvind. I think we can go on for a long, long time just talking about the shared pains and experiences.
For sure, yeah.
Uh, but any like final advice or suggestion for someone who's looking to start up?
My advice would be just that as long as you 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 cover some of those bases, which I think are very important. For example, have some decent amount of savings in place, have at least that basic level of confidence of working with some teams. Like for example, while you could kind of do a startup right out of college, you probably might want to wait a bit. Like there is like, yeah, I mean, you don't want to get too late, but too early isn't particularly helping you either. You will just add too much added stresses to your life, because
Hmm.
let's assume you're going out of college and you start a startup and that does not go according to plan, which it probably won't. You will have the added stress of also looking at all your peers and seeing how well they're doing, and especially at the beginning of your career, that pressure is very huge. So I think there's no point to that. Like wait a couple of years, and that working with someone else, working with another manager, another team, gives you a lot of unique perspectives. In fact, I had this thought that came to me once, that now I have been, like, Quinn has been running for almost 3.5 years now, almost reaching 4 at this point. So I get this feeling like I have been now a manager kind of a role for so long, that I have, and once you're a manager, the amount of things you can absorb from other people in your own company is very low, right? Because you can, obviously, there's a lot of things to learn from your peers as well, whoever you work with, but you don't have a manager.
Hmm.
And I do feel the impacts of that at some point. You feel like, okay, there is no one who, yeah, you can go and talk to other people, like we're doing now, and kind of try to learn, but I still feel it's a very different dynamic when you're actually working with a
Yeah.
manager. So I feel like you should definitely, kind of, someone doing a startup, you want to do that for sure. Work with a manager, kind of get as much as you can before you do it, because you don't know when is the next time that you will have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And one last thing, what's the reason or what's the push behind your LinkedIn followership? Why are you starting the newsletter? How are those
Sure.
things going?
Yeah. So I think LinkedIn has been a kind of a longer project. So mostly I started LinkedIn more like a uh, so when I was initially, kind of getting into the startup ecosystem and stuff like that, I had a lot of I would say mentors or folks who would help me out. So one of the things that I would constantly do on LinkedIn was kind of do these one-on-one sessions with juniors, and I would just do like a casual 20-minute chat or something about any topic, under the sun, mostly about career, engineering, something like that. And it has a twofold effect, I would say. So the one effect is obviously, you are giving back to the community. But even if you leave that aside, if you just talk about it from a pure network perspective, what I've found is it's very hard to connect with folks who are, I use this term loosely, but more established than you in an industry versus people who are kind of newer to it. Like if you were to like reach out to a junior, they are very enthusiastic to talk to you, but if you reach out to someone who's doing, like, I don't know, like a $20 million startup, they might not even give you the time of the day to kind of talk to you, right? But what I realize is, like, if you play this as a long-term game, in the next 4 or 5 years, some of these juniors are gonna do something really insane. So even if you reach out to 1,000 folks, which you can over, let's say, a long period of time, and let's say even just 10 of them, like, end up doing something really insane, your network is crazy. So it's kind of, I feel like if you kind of connect with folks who are newer, that network effect can compound way faster than always just connecting with folks who are more established. And I have felt the advantage of it, because whenever now I hire, there have been cases where it's been people I have talked to before, not from a hiring perspective at all. But they have talked to me, so they kind of reach out to me saying that, hey, it would be great for me to work, in your team, that kind of a thing. So that network just keeps building up. And sometimes, a few of these folks will do their own startups, and that's getting successful. So now if you need some help with something, you can always reach out to them, and they are more than happy to help you, because you were the one who kind of initiated that network and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but it's a very long-term project. If you want to do that LinkedIn thing, it's one of those things like, I kind of say to some friends in the kind of startup networks who kind of, I would say, ignore LinkedIn as a channel. It's like, you might not have use for it today, but for the network to grow, it will take many years. So just start now, so when you need it, it will be there. that kind of a stuff.
Nice, nice. And what about the newsletter? Are you giving that up, or you're going to
No,
continue?
it's just been hard because I want to do the newsletter right. It's like a pet peeve, I guess. Like, I don't have to do it. I could just get it out. But there have been a lot of, and in my newsletter, I was very focused. I'm hyper focused about things in video engineering space. I wanted to be very niche, just have because that's a topic that I don't see a lot of people talk about. Video engineering is not a very hot space. So I want to double down on that and just be very hyper focused, not a lot of fluff. So what I am kind of doing right now is kind of, and this, by the way, came out of like a lot of people kind of reaching out to me saying that I have been saving your posts, and that's just getting hard. So if you just create a newsletter, then I can always come back and refer to it, because I'm interested in video engineering, that kind of, and there isn't a lot of material out there. So what I have been kind of trying to do is kind of go back through all the LinkedIn posts I have done over the last 2 years on video engineering, kind of trying to collate it and convert it into a longer, blog-like format. And I want to cover the content that I've already done, let's say, and compile those, and then kind of start with my schedule newsletter kind of a thing. So it's kind of work in progress, but that's the plan. Kind of, let's see how that goes.
Nice. So great talking to you, Arvind.